The house on Shell Island was as its owner had described it over the telephone. Large and white, with black shutters and wide porches running the length of both the first and second floor. The house had 2 dormer windows that creased the roofline like eyebrows raised in surprise, or maybe anger. The columns that sustained the double layer of porches looked like teeth below those eyes. Brian Holloway parked his van on the left side of the turnaround circle and got out without any of the tools he would need. It was his routine to meet the client first, survey the job, and provide an estimate, then come back to the van for the appropriate equipment if he secured the job. It took 2 rings of the bell and a hard rap from the brass lion's head knocker before anyone answered the door. It was a man in blue jeans and a sweatshirt. He was barefoot. He was clean-shaven, and Brian guessed he was of similar age to himself. Late 30s, maybe a little older. The man had a scowl on his face. "Didn't you see the sign?" he asked. "The sign?" The man pointed to a small brass plaque posted beneath the mailbox to the left of the door. It said, "All service at side door." There was an arrow pointing to the right. No. Sorry, I didn't." "I will see you over there. And could you move your truck to the driveway on the side as well?" It was a question, but it wasn't spoken as a question. "Sure." The man abruptly closed the door. Brian walked back to his van, trying to hold back his anger. He reminded himself it was a job and, yes, after all, he was in the service industry. He moved the van to the driveway that went down the side of the house and widened in front of a 3-car garage. He found the service door and headed toward it. As he walked, he looked across the expansive backyard to the view of the open bay. The same man from the front door opened the service door before he got there. "Are you Mr. Robinette?" Brian asked, though he recognized him from photos on the backs of his books. "Yes, that is right. You are the safe man, I assume?" "Yes, sir." Brian could see Robinette eyeing his van. He realized he had forgotten to attach the magnetic signs to the side panels. He worked out of his house, his garage, actually, and neighbors complained about having a commercial van parked there all the time. So he painted the van a pleasing pale blue and went with magnetic signage. The problem was, he often forgot to put the signs on when he went out on a call. "Don't you have any tools?" Robinette asked. "I like to look at the job first, then figure out what I need," Brian replied. "Follow me, then." Robinette led him down a back hallway that led to a kitchen that looked as though it had been designed to serve a restaurant, or maybe Noah's Ark. He counted 2 of everything: ovens, stoves, sinks, even dishwashers. They then moved through a vast living room with 3 separate seating areas and a massive fireplace. Finally, they came to a library, a room smaller than the living room, but not by much. 3 of its walls were lined floor to ceiling with shelves. The books were bound in leather, and the room smelled musty. There were none of the bright colors Brian saw on book jackets whenever he went into a bookstore. He didn't see any of Robinette's books on the shelves. In the center of one end of the room was a large mahogany desk with a computer screen on it. There was a stack of white paper with a bust of Sherlock Holmes as a paperweight. In front of the desk was a Persian rug of primarily maroon and ochre colors. Without a word, Robinette used his foot to flip up the corner of the rug. He then kicked the fold back until the rug had been moved aside to reveal a small, rectangular door set in the wood flooring. Brian estimated that it was 2 feet by 1.5 feet in size. It was old plywood, and there was a finger hole for pulling it up and open. There were no hinges that Brian could see. Robinette reached down and pulled the door up. He then used both hands to lift the plywood out of the inset in the floor. The opening revealed another door a few inches below. The black steel facing of a safe with dusty gold filigree at the edges, a brass combination dial, and a hammered steel handle. Robinette crouched next to the opening and reached down and gave the steel handle a solid tug, as if to show Brian it was locked. "This is it," he said. "Can you open it?" Brian crouched down across the opening from Robinette and looked at the box. He could see writing in gold script beneath the combo dial. He braced his hands on the floor and leaned down closer to read it. It looked like it said Le Soy, but he wasn't sure. What he was sure of was that he didn't recognize the safe or its manufacturer, let alone know how to pronounce its name. He gave the dial a turn just to see whether it was frozen, and it turned smoothly. That wasn't the problem. He straightened up until he was kneeling on the floor next to the opening. "I don't recognize the make offhand," Brian said. "In a perfect world, I'd have a design schematic. It always helps to know what you're getting into. But don't worry, I can open it. I can open anything." "How much will it cost?" "Unless I find it in one of my books, it's probably going to be a double drill. I charge $150 for the first and $100 for the second." "Jesus, you're killing me." "I might get lucky with the first drill. You never know." "Just do it. I want that thing opened. Too many people have seen it." Brian wasn't sure what he meant by that. "Do you have any idea how old this thing is?" he asked. "The house was built in 29. I assume that it came with it." Brian nodded. "You said on the phone you just bought this place?" "That's right." "The former owner didn't give you the combo?" "Do you think you'd be here if he did?" Brian didn't answer. He was embarrassed by his stupid question. Robinette continued as if he had not asked a question. "It was an estate sale. The old man who lived here died, and he took the combination with him. Nobody even knew there was a safe until I had the floors redone before moving in. Now all the painters, the electricians, everybody who was working on this place to get it ready knows I have a safe in here. You ever read In Cold Blood?" "I think I saw the movie. That's the one with Robert Blake playing a killer before he supposedly became a real killer, right?" "That's right. It's the one where they kill a whole family to get to the fortune in the safe. Only there isn't any fortune. Every one of those workers who was in here went out and told who knows who about the safe I've got in here. I started having dreams. Me with a gun to my head, being told to open up a safe I don't know how to open. I know these guys. I write about them. I know what they're capable of. I've got a daughter. I want that safe open. I don't even want a safe. I don't have anything to put in it." Brian had never read one of Paul Robinette's novels, but he knew before he ever saw the house that he was successful. He'd seen stories about him in the local papers and national magazines. He'd seen a couple of the bad movies based on the books. Robinette wrote crime novels that were bestsellers, though Brian didn't think there had been a new book in the stores in a long while. Brian was willing to accept him as an amateur expert on the criminal mind, but he didn't think that qualified Robinette as an expert on the character of painters and electricians and floor refinishers. "Well, Mr. Robinette, whatever the reason, I will get it open for you." "Good. Then after you get it open, can you get it out of here?" "The whole safe?" "That's what we're talking about, isn't it?" Brian looked down at the edges of the safe. The steel framing went under the flooring. He was pretty sure the houses out on the island were built on fill, the coral and shells dredged up to dig the barge channel leading to the phosphate plant. "You've got no basement here, right?" he said. "No way under the house?" "No, no way." "Then it looks like I'd have to tear up the floor. It goes over the lip of the box. This wood is so old you'd never match it. But I guess you could keep it covered with a rug." No, I don't want to tear up the floor. I've spent enough on the floor. What about the door? Can you just take it off? I could leave it with just the plywood on top, cover it back up with the rug. Once I get it open, I can take it off if you want. But why? You might as well just leave it unlocked. 3 words. In cold blood. Things could go wrong. I want the door taken off. Go get your tools. Yes, sir. Brian started out of the room. Excuse me, are you being sarcastic? Robinette asked. Brian stopped and looked at him. No, sir. I'm just going to get my tools. By the way, it's going to get really loud in here when I start drilling and hammering. It might last a while, too, depending on the thickness of the front plate. Beautiful. I'll work in the upstairs study. In the truck, Brian looked through all his manuals and catalogs for a listing on Lissoy or anything close to it. He found nothing. He called Barney Feldstein, who worked in San Francisco and was the most knowledgeable boxman he knew. And even Barney had never heard of the maker. He put Brian on hold and checked the archives of the Boxman website. When he came back on, he had nada. What Brian wished was that he could talk to his old man about it. If anybody knew the safe maker, it would be him. But that was impossible. It took a request from a lawyer to set up a phone call, and a letter was useless. He needed advice right now. Resigned to the idea that he would go in blind, he gathered his tools and went back into the house. Robinette was still in the study. He was gathering some files from the desk to take with him upstairs. I couldn't find anything in the manuals, and I called a guy who's been doing this longer than anybody I know in the business, Brian said. He never heard of this safe company either. So I'll do my best, but it's looking like a double drill. Explain to me why you have to drill it twice, Robinette said impatiently. I've got to pop out what they call the freewheel. It's the locking gear. To do that, I have to drill through the front plate so I can hit it with a spike. With most safes, I know where the freewheel is. I have design manuals. I can look it up. I then come through with the drill, pop the gear, and open the safe. With this one, I'm going in blind. I'll take an educated guess, but most likely I'll miss. I'll then snake it with a camera, find the right spot, and drill it again. You're sure you're not just taking advantage of me here? What? How do I know this isn't some kind of a scam designed to get the double dip, or the double drill, as the case may be? Brian was thinking that he ought to pick up his tools and just walk out, leaving the arrogant writer with his unopened safe. You open it, asshole. But he needed the money. Laura was planning to take the option of extending her maternity leave by 4 unpaid weeks. Besides, he was curious about the safe. He'd have something to post on the website after he got it open. Look, he said to Robinette, if you want to go out to the truck and look in the manuals and try to find this, be my guest. Robinette waved off the suggestion. No, never mind. Just get it done. Come to the bottom of the stairs and call for me when you are about to open it. I want to be here to see what that old fool Blankenship put in there. Arthur Blankenship? This was his house? Yes, that's right. Did you work for him? No, I just knew of him. He owned the plant. His father dug the channel. Yes, that's right. The Blankenships made this city what it is today. I'll be upstairs. He left the room, carrying his files with him. Brian shook his head. He hated working for assholes, but it was part of the job. He turned and looked down at the safe. Every job was a little mystery. He wondered when was the last time the black steel door was opened. He wondered what Arthur Blankenship had put in there. The first thing Brian did was strap on his knee pads. He then got down on the floor and contemplated the spacing between the combo dial and the handle. He took a piece of white chalk out of his toolbox and marked an X on the door, about 3 inches to the right of the dial, on a direct line to the handle. He knew he'd at least be close. He set the tripod up over the X and hooked the lockdown chain to the safe's handle. He fitted a half-inch bit into the drill, mounted it on the tripod, and plugged it into a nearby wall socket. He was ready to go. From the toolbox, he took out the gloves, safety glasses, and breathing mask and put them on. Lastly, he pressed foam plugs into his ears. The first drill bit lasted 25 minutes before shattering. He guessed he had gone only a quarter-inch in at that point. He let the drill cool for a few minutes while he drank a bottle of water he got out of the toolbox. He then locked a new bit into place. The second bit completed the penetration. Brian pulled the drill out and checked the hole. It appeared that the front plate was 3/4 of an inch thick. He unlocked the tripod and moved it out of the way. The drill hole was still smoking and hot. Brian leaned down and blew away the steel shavings that had accumulated around it. He got the camera scope out of the toolbox, plugged it in, and turned it on. He manipulated the snake-like camera extension, bending it into a curving L shape. He then fed it into the drill hole, keeping his eyes on the small black-and-white video display screen. Almost immediately, Brian saw movement inside the safe. A whitish-gray blur moved across the 3-inch wide screen. He froze for a moment. What was that? He moved the camera in an exaggerated sweep, but saw nothing else. Was it smoke? Did he really see something? He wondered if the camera movement had simply blurred a reflection of the camera's light off of one of the gears or the underside of the faceplate. The video display had no playback function. It did not record. Brian could not go back to check on the movement again. He felt a small tremble go up his spine and neck. He stared at the display for a few more moments and then started moving the scope again. He knew there couldn't have been movement. It had to have been a reflection or a concentration of smoke left over from the drill-through. He saw no further movement in the display, but he did see that the safe's door had no back plate. This, he guessed, had been removed to make the door lighter, since it opened up rather than out. It probably saved 15 or 20 pounds in the lifting. Without a back plate, Brian knew he could use the scope to see into the cavity of the safe and check its contents ahead of Robinette. He pulled the tool out of the drill hole, straightened it, and then snaked it back in. The camera's light reached all corners of the safe. Brian saw that it was empty, save for the layer of dust that had gathered over time at the bottom. "No treasure today," Brian said to himself. He once more removed the scope, reconfigured it, and then fed it back into the hole. By moving the scope, he was able to view the internal workings of the safe's locking mechanism. He was surprised. He counted 9 gears. Most safes had 3 or 4 at the most, never 9. He knew that when he posted a report on this job on the site, other boxmen would not believe him. He decided he would go out to the truck and get his digital camera after he got the safe open. His plan would be to post a report on the site, and then once the doubters posted their negatives, he would upload a few photos. Count 'em, 9 gears. And put them all in their place. He refocused on the work and quickly identified the freewheel, the gear that would release the locking mechanism when popped loose. He measured its location on the front plate. Once more, he marked the surface with chalk and pulled the tripod into place. The second drill-through cost him 3 bits, and by the end his drill smelled like it was burning up inside. This door, in Boxman's parlance, was a Dutch treat, meaning the costs of broken or damaged equipment made the job a barely break-even proposition. Brian knew there was no way he'd be able to ding Robinette for the burned-out drill and the bits. He'd be lucky if the writer just paid him the extra 100 for the second drill-through. He got the spike and the mallet out of the toolbox. He slid the spike into the second drill hole and felt it click against the freewheel. He raised the mallet to strike it, but then stopped. He remembered that Robinette wanted to witness the opening of the safe. Brian stood up. His shirt was sticking to his back, and perspiration had popped across his forehead. He took off the safety glasses and the mask and blew out his breath. He walked out of the study and found the main hallway and the stairs. It was a grand staircase that swept upward in a curve. "Mr. Robinette?" he called out. "What?" came the reply. "I'm ready to open the safe now." Brian headed back to the study. He heard Robinette coming down the steps behind him. He got back into position next to the safe and picked up the mallet. Robinette came into the room. "Is it open?" "Not yet. I thought you wanted to be here. Do you want a set of earplugs? This metal-on-metal gets pretty loud." "Can't be louder than that drill. I don't want earplugs." "Suit yourself." Brian started hammering the spike with the mallet, taking short strokes at first, and then lengthening his arc when the gear refused to give. Each strike on the spike sent a sharp jolt through his body. Finally, after 3 full swings, he felt the gear start to give. He went back to the shorter, more controlled swing and hit the spike 5 more times before the gear broke loose, and he heard it clatter to the bottom of the safe. "Sounds like it's empty," he said to Robinette. "Just open it." Brian reached down and gripped the handle and sharply pulled it down. It came easily. The safe was unlocked. He pulled it up and open, struggling with the weight of the steel door, and was immediately hit with the dead air that had been trapped inside for who knows how long. It was cold and heavy. It smelled like someone's chilled breath. Robinette stepped forward and looked down. He saw that the safe was empty. Brian wasn't looking at the contents, or lack thereof. He was looking at the workmanship of the gears and the slide bolts on the inside of the door. It was a beautiful job, and Brian found himself admiring the craftsmanship behind it. "Empty," Robinette said. "Figures." Brian reached down into the safe to retrieve the freewheel gear from the bottom. He withdrew it quickly. It had felt strange. It had felt like he was reaching into a refrigerator for a can of beer. "That thing must be insulated. It actually feels cold down there. Feel this." He held up the gear. It was ice cold, but Robinette waved away the idea of touching it. "So much for the treasure of Sierra Madre," he said. "All right, get the door off it, and if you don't mind, and it won't cost me too much more, do you have something you can clean that out with?" "I have a shop vac in my truck. It's part of the service." "Good, do it. That dust is already affecting my sinuses. I can't breathe. I'll be upstairs when you're finished." After Robinette was gone, Brian went to work on the door's single hinge. In 5 minutes, he lifted the heavy door out of its spot and carefully leaned it against one of the bookcases. He thought that it weighed more than 40 pounds, even without a backplate. For a moment, he studied the workmanship of the locking mechanism again. The 9, now 8, gears were clustered in an interlocking pattern that had to have been of original design. He really thought it was beautiful, like a painting that should be on display. Almost like a living organism. He was hoping that Robinette would let him take the door, since he no longer wanted it. He gathered his tools and took them out to the truck. He came back in with his camera and the vacuum, and as he re-entered the study, his eyes met those of a young girl who was standing by the opening in the floor. Brian had not replaced the plywood door yet. "Careful, honey. You don't want to fall down in there. You might get hurt." "Okay," she said. She was dark-haired and had a sweet face. Her eyes were dark and serious for such a young girl. She was wearing a dress that looked like it might be a little warm for the summer weather. Something about her was familiar to him. The eyes, maybe. He couldn't place it. He knew there was no reason he would have ever seen her before. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Lucy." Brian's eyes lit in surprise. "Really? That's my favorite name for a girl. My wife and I are about to have a baby, and if it's a girl, we're going to call her Lucy, just like you. Do you believe that? How old are you, sweetheart?" She smiled, revealing she was missing a front tooth.
6.
Wow, I would have guessed at least 7. You're a big girl.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I have to do some cleaning up in here and it might get dusty. You should run along now, okay?
Okay.
See you, Lucy.
Bye-bye, Boxman.
He watched her leave the room, wondering how she knew to call him that. Had her father used the term? He couldn't remember, but assumed Robinette had told her who he was and what he was doing in the house. He listened to her footsteps padding away, and then he went back to work, vacuuming out the safe and then taking photos of the safe's door, front and back. After loading his equipment back into the truck, he sat in the driver's seat while writing out a billing statement on his clipboard. He didn't charge Robinette anything other than the $250 already agreed to. He took the bill back inside with him and called up the stairs to Robinette. Robinette studied the bill as they walked back to the study. "I ought to retire and learn how to legally break into safes. What's this come out to? Like $80 an hour for using a drill?" "Hardly. I'm lucky if I get one job a day. There aren't that many safes that need opening all the time. Most of my work is just plain old locksmithing." "Well, I'd say you did pretty damn good today." Robinette dropped the bill onto the desk in the study as if he were dismissing it. Brian said, "I usually get paid upon completion of the job." Robinette said, "Well, you didn't say that before." "It is custom in the service industry. I didn't think I had to say it." Brian could tell that Robinette didn't like that service thing thrown back at him. "All right," he said curtly. "I'll go up and get you a check." "Thank you." Just before Robinette left the study, Brian spoke up again. "What do you want me to do with the door? It's heavy. I could take it and get rid of it, if you want." No, Robinette answered quickly. "If you don't mind, could you carry it out to the curb and sort of prop it up so it can be seen?" Brian was confused. "If you want me to, but why?" 3 words. In cold blood. Trash pickup doesn't come until Thursday. That means it will be out there a couple days, and maybe the word will get out that there is no longer a safe in here." Brian nodded, though he didn't really follow the logic. "What's that old song say? Paranoia will destroy ya." Robinette turned fully around to confront him. "Look, I don't expect you to understand me or my life. Do you have children?" "Got one on the way. I'm not trying to—" "I don't care what you are trying or not trying to say. Just do your job, and don't worry about my paranoia. My paranoia got me this place and this life. I think in some ways it's like drilling through steel plates for a living, but I like it better. It's not as noisy. Now, if you don't mind, I will go up and get you a check while you take that damn thing out to the curb, okay?" "You got it." At dinner, Brian told Laura all about his encounter with the arrogant writer, and she told him that Robinette hadn't had a book out in at least 3 years. She suggested that maybe that had something to do with his paranoia and arrogance. "I was reading in one of the baby books about how when they get constipated, they can be really miserable," she said. "Maybe Robinette is creatively constipated." Brian laughed, but said some people are just mean, plain and simple. He thought about the girl he had briefly met in the house. Growing up in that place with that father, how would she turn out? How would she make it through? He wondered where the mother was. When he got up to clear the plates, Brian first touched his wife's swollen belly. They were less than a month away. He was excited and scared. Scared about the money, mostly. "Hey, Robinette's daughter's name is Lucy," he called from the sink. "Does that change your mind about it?" Not if it's a girl. I still like it. And that house? It was the Blankenship place. Really? What was it like inside? I've seen it from the outside. It was big. In the kitchen I saw two of everything, even dishwashers. I guess Arthur Blankenship's old man was the guy who put the safe in, when he built that place with money from the plant. After dinner, Brian spent time in the workshop in the garage and posted a report on the Losoy safe on the Boxman website. On the chat list, he posted a note asking if anyone else out there had ever encountered such a safe, and then signed off to go to bed. Brian dreamt of darkness with swirling motion, movements like wisps of smoke, and then, for just a moment, they came together to form a face he did not recognize as man or woman, adult or child. Then it was gone, and he woke up. "What is it?" his wife whispered. "A dream. Just a bad dream." "What was it about?" Laura always asked about dreams. She thought they were important. "I don't know. It was more like a feeling. A bad feeling." He got up and walked the house, checking every lock. This was his routine, but it wasn't comforting. He had the best locks money could buy, but he knew how to pick and break every one of them. He knew there were other people with the same skills. He could never feel totally secure. He sat in the kitchen in the dark and drank a beer. He wondered if he was paranoid like Robinette. He wondered if he would become like the writer once his own child was born. He started humming the Kinks song, "Paranoia Will Destroy Ya." He took the beer into the nursery and looked around in the dark. The room was completely outfitted and ready, save for the things that Laura wanted to be sex-specific. They'd had a disagreement. Laura wanted to know early on whether it was a boy or girl coming. Brian wanted to be surprised. So she knew, and he didn't. She had done a good job of keeping the secret. Brian's secret was that he wanted a girl. He didn't want to find out beforehand because he feared if he learned he was the father of a boy, he would lose his edge of excitement, that he might actually become depressed before the baby was even born. The reason he wanted a girl was that he considered his own life and thought it was too easy for boys to get messed up, to go down the wrong path. With girls, there seemed to be more two-way streets. They could turn around and come back if they wanted to. With boys, it was all one-way streets. No turning back. Brian picked up a complete change of hardware job the next day. It was an old Victorian in the Heights, 8 doors, including the garage. All Medico locks and Baldwin brass. It was a 6-hour job. That and the markup on the materials made it a good day. He came home relaxed, a big check in his wallet. He and Laura went out to eat at the Bonefish Grill. They figured that when the baby came, they wouldn't be going anywhere for a while. Might as well do it when you can. But that night wasn't perfect. The dream came back. He saw the face form in the darkness again. A face made of cigarette smoke. In the dream, it smelled like his burning drill. He awoke and sat on the side of the bed. He felt Laura's hand caress his back. Being pregnant had made her a light sleeper. "Was it the same dream?" she asked. "Yeah." "Do you remember any more of it?" "Not really. It's just this bad feeling. It's dread. It's like I let something loose in the world. Like it was all my fault." "What was? What did you do?" "I don't know." "You think it's about the baby?" Brian laughed. "No, it's not that." He checked the house again, making sure it was secure, even though he did not feel secure. When he went back to the bedroom, he started getting dressed. "What are you doing?" Laura asked. "It's the middle of the night." "I don't know. I'm going to take a drive." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. I just want to take a drive, put the windows down."
Be careful.
I will be. The phone didn't ring the next day. No jobs came in. Brian called a foundry in Michigan and ordered drill bits to replace those he'd broken on the Robinette job. He then spent the rest of the morning in the garage workshop, trying to research the Losoy safe. He wrote a letter to his father about it. He went on the computer and Googled the name Losoy, but only came up with a book publisher in France using the name. He checked the Boxman website, but no one had responded to his earlier post, other than to say they had never encountered a safe of that brand. When it was lunchtime, he opened the side door to go to the house. 2 men were standing there. They wore suits and dour expressions. It had been 20 years since he'd had to deal with cops, but he still knew the type. "Officers, what can I do for you?" "Actually, I'm Detective Stevens with the police department, and this is Agent Rowan with the FBI. Are you Brian Holloway?" "Yes." "Is it Laura, the baby? What happened?" "Who is Laura?" Stevens asked. "My wife. She's at work. This is not about her. Can we come in?" Brian stepped back. Despite the relief of knowing this was not about Laura, he felt the same sense of dread he had awoken from the dream with, building in his chest. "Then what is it?" "Have a seat," Rowan said. Brian sat on the stool next to the workbench. The 2 lawmen remained standing, looking around the shop as they spoke, moving about. The detective looked like he was deferring to the agent in this matter, whatever it was. "This is how I would like to work this," Agent Rowan said. "We're going to ask you some questions here, and the first time you lie to us, we pack it in and put you in a cell to think about it. Fair enough?" "This is a joke, right?" "No joke." "Then questions about what? Am I a suspect in something?" "Not yet. We think you are just a witness, but like I said, the first time you lie to us, you become a suspect and we treat you like one." "Witness to what? What happened?" "I said we are going to ask the questions. But let's start this thing off right by getting everything right. You are Brian Holloway, 39 years old, and you reside in the home that this garage is attached to. Do I have all of that right?" "Yes." "And your father has spent the last 22 years in an Illinois State Correctional Facility, serving a life sentence without parole for the crime of murder." Brian shook his head. The sins of the father always visited the son. "This is about my father?" "I was 19 when he went away. What's that got to—" "He was a boxman too, wasn't he? Only he opened boxes for the outfit in Chicago. He taught you everything you know, right?" "Wrong." "He killed a man who came home and caught him in the act, didn't he?" "He didn't do it. The man he was doing the job for did it. He panicked." "Oh, I guess that makes it okay." "Look, what do you want? I haven't talked to my father in 3 years." "Do your clients know that you're the son of Harry Houdini Holloway?" "Look, I run a clean, legal business. Why would I tell someone who my father is? Why would I have to? This isn't Chicago, and I'm not my father." "Where were you last night?" Stevens asked, suddenly joining in, changing the direction of things. Brian started to think. Maybe the whole thing was choreographed. Maybe it wasn't about the old man. Maybe it was all misdirection and sudden change. "Last night? I was here. I was home." "From when till when?" I got home around 3 yesterday, and I did some work in here, and then my wife and I went out for dinner, and we got home about 8:30, and that was it. We stayed home after that." "Okay. 8:30 until when? When was the next time you left?" Brian hesitated. He looked at their faces, wondering what had happened and how much they knew. Cops always had the advantage. He knew this. His father had always said that when it came to cops, to lie was to die. He shook his head. "Until now. I haven't left yet." Each of the men in front of him visibly stiffened, and their faces took on a stony resolve. "Turn around," Stephen said. "Assume the position. Your dad probably taught it to you, too." Instead, Brian raised his hands as if to stop their advance on him. "Okay, look. I took a drive last night. I was gone less than an hour." "When last night?" "I never looked at the clock. I woke up, couldn't sleep. I took a drive. It was the middle of the night." "And you never looked at the clock in the car, huh?" "No. I took my truck. The clock in it doesn't work, and I forgot to put on my watch." "Where did you go on your drive?" "I just drove around, all over the place. I even went over the bridge and cruised around the island." Brian knew he had to give them that. He knew they had something. It must be the electronic toll pass on the truck's windshield. There would be a record of him crossing the bridge. "Why the island? What did you do while you were there?" Brian let out a deep breath. They were cornering him. He didn't understand this. The FBI doesn't come around for stealing trash. There was something else going on. "All right, listen, I'll tell you everything. The other day I had a job out on the island. I opened an old safe for a guy, and the client had me take the door off the box and carry it out to the curb for trash pickup. He said the pickup wasn't for a few days. So last night I went back by his place, and I took the door. It would have been picked up this morning anyway. It's not stealing. He put it out for trash pickup. To him, it was trash." "And why did you take it?" "Because until I was there, I had never seen or heard of that safe or its maker, and I wanted to study it. Maybe practice on it a bit. Besides, it's a museum piece. I didn't want it thrown away." "Where is it?" Brian pointed to an object beneath an old mover's blanket that was leaning against the opposite wall. Rowan walked over and lifted up the blanket for a look. He then dropped the cloth back down and looked at Brian. "It was not a crime to take it," Brian said. "It was trash." "So you say." "Look, what is going on? Why are you here? Did Robinette say I stole his door? Is that what this is about? I know the guy's famous, but do they really send the FBI out on a call like that?" "No, they don't." "Then what is this?" There was a pause, and the lawmen looked at each other for a moment before Stephen spoke. "We're not worried about you stealing Robinette's trash. We're wondering if you stole his daughter." "What?" "His daughter, Mr. Holloway. She's disappeared." Brian thought of the little girl with dark, familiar eyes and the winter dress in the middle of the summer. "He said I took his daughter?" "It doesn't matter what he said. We have to check everybody out. You were the last person other than the family to be in that house. We understand that you and Mr. Robinette didn't get along so well, so we're starting with you." Inside Brian's chest, it felt as though his lungs were filling with wax. They were becoming heavy and hard. Again he thought of the little girl standing precariously at the edge of the safe. It was like she had been waiting there for him. "Did you check the safe?" he suddenly asked. "What do you mean?" Rowan asked. "The safe in the office. When I was there, she came in and was standing by the safe. Maybe I don't know, maybe after I left she went back to it. There's no door, but there was a piece of the flooring that covered it and that I put back in place." Rowan glanced at the shape of the safe's door beneath the blanket. He then glanced at Stevens, and another silent communication passed. Stevens turned and walked out of the garage. Rowan looked back at Brian. "The safe would be kind of small, wouldn't it?" "The box was pretty deep. It went down at least 1.5 feet." "You said she came into the study?" "I went out to my truck to get the vacuum, and when I came back in, she was just standing there." "What did she say to you?" Brian thought for a moment. He tried to remember all the details. He was filling with fear for the little girl. "She just told me her name, and I asked how old she was. I told her she looked older. She said her name was—" "Why would you do that?" "Do what?" "Ask the girl how old she was." Brian shrugged. "I don't know. I guess because we're about to have a kid. My wife is 8 months along, and I don't know, I never really thought about the ages of children before. Now I do." Rowan took a few moments to grind over the answer. Brian shifted his weight on the stool and started pumping his knee. "Mr. Holloway, you seem agitated. Is something wrong?" "Of course there's something wrong. That girl is missing and I just have a bad feeling about it. Look, I had nothing to do with it. You're wasting your time. So do what you have to do with me and get it over with. I'll take a lie detector if you want. You can go search my truck, too. Just get past me and go find her before it's too late." Rowan seemed to be taken aback. "What do you mean, before it's too late?" "Isn't that how these things always end up?" Before Rowan answered, Stevens came in. He looked at his partner and then at Brian. "Safe's empty." "Mr. Holloway has volunteered to take a Polly," Rowan said. "We can also take a look in the truck." Stevens nodded. "What about your home?" Rowan said. "Can we look around inside?" Brian flashed on the bag of stale dope in the bedroom dresser. Laura quit smoking when they decided to get pregnant. Out of fairness, he had stopped as well, and the bag had sat in the drawer with his socks for a year. "If you're just going to look around for the girl, closets and stuff, that's fine. But I don't want you going through drawers and stuff. Just make it quick. And don't mess things up, or my wife will know." "You know what I still don't understand?" Rowan said. "You're in there doing a job for Mr. Robinette, and you go and ask his daughter how old she is. Why is that?" "I don't know. I told you. I wondered how old she was. What else do you ask? She was a cute girl, and I wondered how old she was. I'm sort of hoping that we have a girl, and so that's all." "You said was," Stevens said. "What?" "You said she was a cute girl. Why do you use the past tense? Is there something you want to tell us?" Brian shook his head. "Look, you've got this wrong and you're wasting time. Don't do this. You should be out there looking for—" "Mr. Holloway," Rowan said, "I think we are going to take you up on your kind offer to take a look around here, and maybe take you down to the station to set up a polygraph. Your offer is still good, right?" They kept him in a small, windowless and, it seemed to him, airless room. There was no clock on the wall, and he lost track of time. He was thinking about the girl he had seen by the safe, Lucy. They came in from time to talk to him, to ask him the same questions over and over. But unsatisfied with his answers, they would leave again. He could tell it was dark outside. He could sense it. It had been at least that long. Finally, the door came open again, and Stevens looked in. "You have 10 minutes, he said. "What?" Stevens backed away from the opening, and then Laura appeared. Hesitantly, she stepped into the room, and the door was closed behind her. "Brian, what is going on? I came home, and they were in our house. They had a search warrant. What did you do?" He shook his head. "I didn't do anything. Robinette's daughter is missing, and they think I took her. All I did was talk to her." "You talked to her? When?" "That day. I told you at dinner." "No, you told me she had the same name we picked. You didn't say you talked to her." "She came in where I was working. I asked her what her name was and how old she was, and that was it. I told her I had to get to work. She left, and I never saw her again. That's it." She slid into the seat across the table from him. She never took her eyes off of him. "Did you tell them this?" "Yes, I told them 100 times. They're wasting their time with me when they should be out looking for her. If you ask me, they ought to be talking to Robinette instead of me." Laura put her hand on her abdomen, as if calming the baby inside. She started rocking in her chair. "Oh my God, I can't believe this," she said. "Neither can I," Brian said. He reached a hand across the table, and she put her other hand on top of it.
Have you asked for a lawyer?
No, I don't need a lawyer. I didn't do anything.
Brian, just tell me. Did you take that girl anywhere?
He pulled his hand back from her. His mouth came open, and it was a moment before he found his voice. Laura.
Where did you go when you got up last night? You've been acting weird all week. What is going on with you?
They sent you in here, didn't they? They convinced you out there and sent you in here to...
No, Brian, you're wrong. You're being paranoid. I just want to know what is going...
The door to the small room suddenly came open, and Rowan stepped in. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, you can go on home now.
What do you mean?
Laura asked. Brian started to push back his chair. We found her, the agent said in a matter-of-fact tone. I guess we owe you an apology, Mr. Holloway. We didn't mean to give you such a hard time. Brian stood up, a weird mixture of relief and anger overtaking him. Is she all right? He asked. She's fine. Patrol just brought her into the station. Turns out she didn't like moving into the new house. He forced a laugh. She thinks it's haunted, so she split. She walked all the way back to her old neighborhood and hid in her best friend's guest house. Rowan stepped back from the doorway so they could leave. Brian walked slowly. He was having a hard time understanding what Rowan had just told them. He was having a hard time dealing with what his wife had just asked him as well. That girl found her way back to her old house? He asked. That's right, Rowan said. Step this way and I'll get you back your property. Then you'll be out of here. Brian was led down the hallway and into a large squad room. There were several detectives working at desks and moving about. Across the room was another room, separated by a glass wall. He could see a boardroom table in there. Sitting at the table were Detective Stevens and a girl. She was maybe 13 years old. She looked like she was crying. Rowan went to his desk and got a manila envelope out of a drawer. He handed it to Brian. It had his wallet and keys in it, his loose change. He didn't bother tearing it open. He just held it as he stared at the girl in the glass room. Rowan noticed his gaze and looked across the room as well. She's okay. She spent the night eating potato chips and drinking soda pop. I guess she had such a good time she still doesn't want to go back home. Does Robinette have another daughter? No, just the one. Just Teresa, who doesn't want to go home. Brian thought of the dream, of the dread he felt when he woke up from it, the feeling that he had let something loose. Teresa? Rowan looked at him. That's right. I thought you said you... Can I talk to her? To the girl? No, I don't think that would be proper, Mr. Holloway. Your involvement with this thing is over as far as I'm concerned. I really need to speak to her. Well, that's not going to happen. Now it's time for you and your wife to head on home. What did she say about the house being haunted? I'll walk you out. He gripped Brian's upper arm and ushered him toward the squad room's exit. They went into another hallway and headed toward the door at the end. Rowan kept his hand on Brian's arm. Laura trailed behind them. You know who owned that house before Robinette? Brian asked. Rowan didn't answer. Arthur Blankenship. So? So maybe she's got a point to why she's scared. He built the plant. They say the runoff from the phosphate is responsible for all the fish kills. It's like there's a big cloud of black water in the bay. Hell, he built this city. He knew where all the bodies were buried. Maybe... It doesn't matter. What matters is that she's going home safe. Brian jerked his arm free and stopped. He pointed back down the hallway in the direction they had come from. She's not the one I saw in the house. She isn't the girl I spoke to. Rowan held up his palms in a hands-off manner. He smiled. Mr. Holloway, I've got a caseload like you wouldn't believe. This is one of the cases that ends happy, that ends good. Let's just let this go."
"And what if I can't?"
"Then you are on your own, sir. Let's go."
He grabbed Brian's arm again and led him to the door. They were quiet at first on the ride home. Laura drove. Brian thought about what he had seen in the Robinette house. They were almost home before Laura spoke for the first time. "Brian, what's going on? What were you talking about back there?"
"I don't know. I don't want to talk about it."
"Why?"
"Because I don't really feel like talking to you right now."
"Brian, I'm sorry. They told me you did something to her. They said they had evidence and that you had admitted asking her inappropriate questions. They said it had something to do with our baby, the pressure you were under, and how we haven't had sex. They said they had seen it before."
Brian shook his head. "You told them about our sex?"
"They asked a lot of questions. I felt I had to."
"And you believed everything they said? That I admitted asking inappropriate questions? That I did something to her?"
"I didn't want to."
"I was talking to a 6-year-old, not a 13-year-old. I didn't ask anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong."
"I know, baby. I'm sorry. But you were acting strange all week, and then you went out last night. I just thought... I don't know what I thought. All I can say is that I'm sorry."
Brian looked over at his wife. In the darkness he could see that she was crying, doing nothing about the tears rolling down her cheeks. He didn't do anything about it either. In the workshop, Brian had a message waiting for him on his computer the next morning. It was from a boxman in Montreal named Robert Pipon. Rather than publicly post the message on the website, Pipon answered Brian's posted inquiry with a direct and private email. Though Pipon was obviously French and had some language difficulties, his message was clear. "Take cautions. I have heard story of the threshold safe. One boxman saw his young brother who was killed. I have not seen for myself. Was it in the floor? This is passed on stories. The boxman he make mistake to open it." Brian stared at the message for a long time, trying to decipher its meanings. He'd felt a coldness begin in his center. He knew it was the beginning of fear and the confirmation of something he had felt deep inside. The message had Pipon's business number and address at the bottom. Brian picked up the workshop phone and punched in the long-distance number. After 3 rings, it was answered by a machine. The outgoing message was in French, and Brian didn't understand a word of it. But then the speaker switched to English with a heavy French accent. He identified the line as belonging to Fauché Lock and Safe and asked the caller to leave a message. But then he gave another number in case of an emergency. Brian wrote it down, hung up, and then called the emergency number. The second call was answered after 4 rings, and Brian heard a drill wind down before a man spoke rapidly in French. It was obviously a cell phone, and Brian had interrupted a job. He wondered how the phone had ever been heard over the sound of the drill. "I'm sorry," Brian said. "Do you speak English? Is Robert Pipon there?"
"This is Robert. Who is this, please?"
Brian identified himself and told Pipon he had received his message. He needed to ask him questions. Pipon tried to beg off, saying he was in the middle of drilling a safe and people were waiting for him to complete the job. Brian insisted and promised to be quick. Pipon relented and lowered his voice to a whisper when he spoke further. "What did you mean by a threshold safe in your message?" Brian asked first.
"It is the safe you showed. It is Threshold, the name. Le Seuil."
He pronounced it like Le Seuil. Brian tried to say it that way. Le Seuil means threshold?
"The threshold, yes, like the doorway you have."
"I understand. And the story you heard, who told you?" The man I bought from him my business, Fauché, he told me. He told me if I get a job, no, do not open. And so I tell you.
He told you he opened one?
A very long time ago, yes. He said big mistake opening that one, yes.
Why?
Well, he is not saying everything. He is just warning against it, you know? He is saying bad things come out, like a dream. I didn't ask. He sound, you know, a little crazy.
Is he still around? Is he retired?
Pipon chuckled. He's retired to the cemetery. Monsieur Fauché was very old when I bought his business.
Frustration was welling up in Brian. Everything was like the smoke in his dreams. It formed the whispery outlines of a picture, but not enough was there to identify it. In your message, you said the man who opened the safe saw his brother who was killed. What do you mean?
Fauché, he had his brother who was killed in the train. An accident, you see. But before that, Fauché opened the threshold safe on a job. He is saying to me that he saw a man. It was his brother, but afterward, like he was an old man now. He tell Fauché to watch out on the train. He gives a warning, but Fauché don't know this. He didn't tell nobody about this. Then a year later, his brother, he got killed on the train. You understand? It was a crazy story. I didn't pay too much attention because I never heard of these safes, and Fauché, he was, you know, a little crazy. His wife make him sell me the business. But then I see you on their website and think, aha, I better give a warning for this, just in case, you know.
The language translation made it difficult for Brian to fully grasp the story. Do you remember anything else about the story?
No, that is what I know. I tell you what I know.
Did he say who made these safes? Anything about the manufacturer?
I did ask him this, and he say he could not find out. He said it was a big mystery. Yes, he tried to learn. The safe came on a boat from France. This is a long time ago. And there are no records anymore. In the war, the Germans came and destroyed these records. He found nothing because he was like you, with questions.
Pipon made a spitting noise in the phone as if to signal the finality and the fruitlessness of searching for the origin of the Lessoy safe.
I have my work now, he said.
Yeah, okay, Brian said. Thank you for your help.
You show a picture of the door of the safe on the website,
Pipon suddenly said. Yes, that's right.
You took the door off and leave it off?
Yes. Brian slowly hung up, even as he could hear Pipon's voice on the line exhorting him to be cautious. He thought about the girl he had seen in the house on the island. He thought he now recognized her eyes. He picked up the phone again and called his wife at work. As soon as she heard his voice, she whispered that she was really busy. She wanted to talk to him, but the phone was ringing off the wall. Her job was to take reservations for the most popular restaurant in town. Real quick then, he said. I have to know. It's a girl, right? We're having a girl. Why are you asking now? Because I need to know right now. I'm not going to tell you. You told me not to tell you. I need to know, Laura. It's important. Just tell me. Is it a girl? There was a long pause before she answered. Yes, it is a girl, Brian. You are the father of a daughter named Lucy. Okay. Thanks. He knew it was a significant moment, and Laura was expecting more from him, but it was all he could think to say. He put the phone down. He turned away from the workbench and looked at the old blue blanket that covered the door of the Lessoy safe. He knew what he had to do. Robinette answered the door. This time Brian did not go to the service entrance. Look, Robinette said before Brian could speak. I am sorry for any inconvenience this may have caused you. The police asked me for a list of names. Yours was on it. End of story.
Brian noticed that there were deep lines under Robinette's eyes now. He looked weary and defeated, even though he had gotten his daughter back. "I'm not here about that," Brian said. "I don't care about that." "Then what do you want? You can't just show up here and—" "I want to talk to your daughter." "What? No, you're not going near her. She's been through enough. We're moving." "I have to talk to her." "I'm going to call the police if you do not leave my property." "I want to talk to her about the ghost, about the little girl." Robinette closed his mouth and just stared. Brian saw recognition in his eyes. It was recognition of something that maybe Robinette wasn't sure he believed himself. Then he changed when he saw the ploy. "The police told you," he said. "No, the police wouldn't talk to me. I know because I saw her too. When I was here, I saw her." "I don't care what you think you saw. I want you out of here." He started to close the door, but Brian put his foot into the threshold and stopped it. "Her name is Lucy. I saw her too, and I need to talk to your daughter." "Why? She's been through enough. First she lost her mother, now this. What can you possibly say to her?" "I can tell her who Lucy is." Brian pushed on the door, and Robinette moved back without resistance. Brian walked by him and headed to the stairs. "Where is she?" "In her room. She won't come out." Brian went up the stairs and found all the doors in the upper hallway closed. Robinette called from below. "The second room on the left." Brian went to the door, knocked, and then opened it when he heard someone call. "Come in." The girl he had seen in the police station was sitting on a bed, her legs folded beneath her, her back against the wall. "Teresa, right?" "Who are you? Did my father send for you?" "No, I just came. I'm the one who opened the safe. I saw the girl that day. She talked to me. She said her name was Lucy." Teresa's eyes widened. "Then you believe me?" Brian nodded. "I believe you. Have you talked to her?" Teresa nodded. "What did she tell you?" She, doesn't know what is happening. She said she came through the door. That's all she says about that." "What about what happened to her? Does she know?" "She said there was a pool, and she didn't know how to swim." Brian closed his eyes for a moment. "She's confused," Teresa continued. "I said, when did it happen? And she said it didn't happen yet. She didn't make sense." Brian nodded. It did make sense to him. "When does she come?" he asked. "When do you see her?" "I don't know, any time. It's not like there's a schedule. Sometimes I close my eyes, and when I open them, she's there." "Do you know where she goes when she isn't here?" "I think she must go back through the door she talks about." "Would that be where she is now?" "I don't know, I guess. I don't see her." "Thank you, Teresa." Brian turned back toward the door. "Who is she?" Teresa asked. Brian looked back at her. "She's my daughter. She's coming in a few weeks." "You mean she's not born?" "Not yet. I think she came through the door to warn me. Now I have to go close the door." Robinette was standing in the upper hallway when Brian came out. It was like he couldn't venture into his daughter's room. "We have to put the door back on the safe," Brian said. "This all started with the safe." "We can't. The trash was taken yesterday. You put—" "I have the door. It's in my truck." Brian headed to the stairs and started down. As he went, he looked back up at Robinette. "Do you want me to bring it in through the service door?" Robinette looked at him as if not comprehending the question. Then he spoke in a quiet voice. "No, that won't be necessary." They were on the back porch of the house. It was a warm night. Summer was coming on strong. And Laura, with the extra weight and the extra heart beating inside her, had to get out of the unair-conditioned house. They sat side by side in lawn chairs, holding hands. Brian had forgiven her. There were more important things to concentrate on. Besides, he knew the cops could convince anybody of anything. Years back, they had done it to him with his old man, practically had him believing that his father had shot the mark in cold blood. He had not told her the whole story of his return to the house on Shell Island. He didn't want to upset her, especially now that it was almost time for the baby. He only told her that he had gone back to see Robinette, to set things right. "So there might be some money in it," he said now on the porch. "It could really help us with you taking the extra time off and all." "What money? For what?" He said all of this with his daughter and the safe and stuff made him think about writing again. He said he has an idea for a story, and since he'll want to know about safes and being a boxman, he'll pay me for it. Like to be an expert for his story. Laura sat up straight in her folding chair. She was excited by the proposition. "How much will he pay?" "We didn't get to that yet. I'm supposed to go back over there tomorrow. I'll find out then." "Those writers make a lot of money." She didn't say anything else. She was leaving it to him, but making it clear she expected him to get a good chunk out of Robinette. "We'll see what he says," Brian said, not wanting to promise anything or push anything. They were quiet for a moment, and then she let go of his hand and leaned forward. "You know what I want to do?" she asked. "With the money, I mean." "I don't know, to keep paying the bills?" "No, we should get more than just that. I want air conditioning, Brian. We deserve that. And then we should put in a pool. I want to go swimming at night to cool off." Brian stared straight ahead and off the porch into the distance. He realized that the backyard was just big enough for a pool. Without a word, he stood up and went back inside. This has been a Hachette audio production of The Safe Man, written by Michael Connelly, read by David W. Collins. Executive producer Michelle McGonigal. Produced and directed by Dennis Kao. Post-production by Jeff Thomas. The Safe Man is also available as an ebook from Little Brown and Company. Text copyright 2012 by Michael Connelly. Audio production copyright and published 2012 by Hachette Audio. All rights reserved. Except as permitted under the U.S. Copyright Act of 1976, no part of this production may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, or stored in a database or retrieval system without the prior written permission of the publisher. This audiobook is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental.
Continue listening for an excerpt from The Black Box, written by Michael Connelly, read by Michael McConaughey.
Part 1. The Gun Walk, 2012. Chapter 1. They made him wait. The explanation was that Coleman was at Chow, and pulling him out would create a problem, because after the interview they would have to reinsert him into the second meal block, where he might have enemies unknown to the guard staff. Someone could make a move against him, and the guards wouldn't see it coming. They didn't want that. so they told Bosch to hang loose for 40 minutes while Coleman finished his Salisbury steak and green beans sitting at a picnic table in D Yard in the comfort and safety of numbers. All the rolling 60s at San Quentin shared the same food and rec blocks. Bosch passed the time by studying his props and rehearsing his play. It was all on him. No help from a partner. He was by himself. Cutbacks in the department's travel budget had turned almost all prison visits into solo missions. Bosch had taken the first flight up that morning and hadn't thought about the timing of his arrival. The delay wouldn't matter in the long run. He wasn't flying back till 6 p.m., and the interview with Rufus Coleman probably wouldn't take long. Coleman would either go for the offer or not. Either way, Bosch wouldn't be long with him. The interview room was a steel cubicle with a built-in table dividing it. Bosch sat on one side, a door directly behind him. Across the table from him was an equal-sized space with a matching door. They would bring Coleman through there, he knew. Bosch was working the 20-year-old murder of Annika Jesperson, a photographer and journalist shot to death during the 1992 riots. Harry had worked the case and the crime scene for less than an hour back then before being pulled away to work other murders in a crazy night of violence that had him moving from case to case. After the riots ended, the department formed the Riot Crimes Task Force, and the investigation of the Jesperson murder was taken over by that unit. It was never solved, and after 10 years of being classified as open and active, the investigation and what little evidence had been gathered was quietly boxed up and placed in archives. It wasn't until the 20th anniversary of the riots was approaching that the media-savvy chief of police sent a directive to the lieutenant in charge of the Open Unsolved Unit, ordering a fresh look at all unsolved murders that occurred during the unrest in 1992. The chief wanted to be ready when the media started their inquiries in regard to their 20 years later stories. The department might have been caught flat-footed back in '92, but it wouldn't be in 2012. The chief wanted to be able to say that all unsolved murders from the riots were still under active investigation. Bosch specifically asked for the Annika Jesperson case, and after 20 years returned to it. Not without misgivings. He knew that most cases were solved within the first 48 hours, and after that the chances of clearance dropped markedly. This case had barely been worked for even one of those 48 hours. It had been neglected because of circumstances, and Bosch had always felt guilty about it, as though he had abandoned Annika Jesperson. No homicide detective likes leaving a case behind unsolved, but in this situation Bosch was given no choice. The case was taken from him. He could easily blame the investigators that followed him on it, but Bosch had to count himself among those responsible. The investigation started with him at the crime scene. He couldn't help but feel that no matter how short a time he was there, he must have missed something. Now, 20 years later, he got another shot at it, and it was a very long shot at that. He believed that every case had a black box, a piece of evidence, a person, a positioning of facts that brought a certain understanding and helped explain what had happened and why. But with Annika Jesperson, there was no black box. Just a pair of musty cardboard boxes retrieved from archives that gave Bosch little direction or hope. The boxes included the victim's clothing and bulletproof vest, her passport and other personal items, as well as a backpack and the photographic equipment retrieved from her hotel room after the riots. There was also the single 9mm shell casing found at the crime scene and the thin investigative file put together by the Riot Crimes Task Force, the so-called murder book. The murder book was largely a record of inactivity on the case on the part of the RCTF. The task force had operated for a year and had had hundreds of crimes, including dozens of murders, to investigate. It was almost as overwhelmed as investigators like Bosch had been during the actual riots. The RCTF had put up billboards in South LA that advertised a telephone tip line and rewards for information leading to arrests and convictions for riot-related crimes. Different billboards carried different photos of suspects or crime scenes or victims. 3 of them carried a photo of Annika Jesperson and asked for any information on her movements and murder. The unit largely worked off what came in from the billboards and other public outreach programs and pursued cases where there was solid information. But nothing of value ever came in on Jesperson, and so nothing ever came of the investigation. The case was a dead end. Even the one piece of evidence from the crime scene, the bullet casing, wasn't of value without a gun to match it to. In his survey of the archived records and case effects, Bosch found that the most noteworthy information gathered from the first investigation was about the victim. Jesperson was 32 years old and from Denmark, not Germany as Bosch had thought for 20 years. She worked for a Copenhagen newspaper called Berlingske Tidende, where she was a photojournalist in the truest sense of the word. She wrote stories and shot film. She had been a war correspondent who documented the world's skirmishes with both words and pictures. She had arrived in Los Angeles the morning after the riots had started, and she was dead by the next morning. In the following weeks, the Los Angeles Times ran short profiles of all those killed during the violence. The story on Jesperson quoted her editor and her brother back in Copenhagen and depicted the journalist as a risk-taker who was always quick to volunteer for assignments in the world's danger zones. In the 4 years prior to her death, she had covered conflicts in Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, Senegal, and El Salvador. The unrest in Los Angeles was hardly on the level of war or some of the other armed conflicts she had photographed and reported on, but according to the Times, she happened to be traveling across the United States on vacation when rioting in the City of Angels broke out. She promptly called the photo desk at the BT, as the newspaper in Copenhagen was more commonly known, and left a message with her editor saying that she was heading to LA from San Francisco. But she was dead before she had filed any photos or a story with a newspaper. Her editor had never spoken to her after getting the message. After the RCTF was disbanded, the unsolved Jesperson case was assigned to the Homicide Squad at 77th Street Division, the geographical policing area where the murder occurred. Given to new detectives with their own backup of open cases, the investigation was shelved. The notations in the investigative chronology were few and far between, and largely just a record of the outside interest in the case. The LAPD wasn't working the case with anything approaching fervor, but her family and those who knew Jesperson in the international journalism community did not give up hope. The chronology included records of their frequent inquiries about the case. These marked the record right up until the case files and effects were sent to archives. After that, those who inquired about Annika Jesperson were most likely ignored, as was the case they were calling about. Curiously, the victim's personal belongings were never returned to her family. The archive boxes contained the backpack and property that was turned over to the police several days after the murder, when the manager of the Travelodge on Santa Monica Boulevard matched the name on a riot victim list printed in the Times to the guest registry. It had been thought that Annika Jesperson had skipped out on her room. The belongings she had left behind were put in a locked storage closet at the motel. Once the manager determined that Jesperson wasn't coming back because she was dead, the backpack containing her property was delivered to the RCTF, which was working out of temporary offices at Central Division in downtown. The backpack was in one of the archive boxes that Bosch had retrieved from case storage. It contained 2 pairs of jeans, 4 white cotton shirts, and assorted underwear and socks. Jesperson obviously traveled light, packing like a war correspondent even for a vacation. This was probably because she was heading straight back to war following her vacation in the United States. Her editor had told the Times that the newspaper was sending Jesperson directly from the States to Sarajevo in the former Yugoslavia, where war had broken out just a few weeks earlier. Reports of mass rapes and ethnic cleansing were breaking in the media, and Jesperson was heading to the center of the war, due to leave the Monday after the riots erupted in Los Angeles. She probably considered the quick stop by L.A. to snap shots of rioters just a warm-up for what awaited in Bosnia. Also in the pockets of the backpack were Jesperson's Danish passport, along with several packages of unused 35mm film. Jesperson's passport showed an INS entry stamp at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York 6 days before her death. According to the investigative records and the newspaper accounts, she had been traveling by herself and had made it to San Francisco when the verdicts came down in Los Angeles and the violence began. None of the records or news stories accounted for where in the United States Jesperson had been during the 5 days leading up to the riots. It apparently wasn't seen as germane to the investigation of her death. What did seem clear was that the breakout of violence in Los Angeles was a strong pull to Jesperson, and she immediately diverted, apparently driving through the night to Los Angeles in a rental car she had picked up at San Francisco International. On Thursday morning, April 30th, she presented her passport and Danish press credentials at the LAPD media office in order to get a press pass. Bosch had spent most of 1969 and 1970 in Vietnam. He had encountered many journalists and photographers in the base camps and out in fire zones as well. In all of them, he had seen a unique form of fearlessness. Not a warrior's fearlessness, but almost a naive belief in one's ultimate survival. It was as though they believed that their cameras and press passes were shields that would save them, no matter the circumstance. He had known one photographer particularly well. His name was Hank Zinn, and he worked for the Associated Press. He had once followed Bosch into a tunnel in Cu Chi. Zinn was the kind of guy who never turned down an opportunity to go out into Indian country and get what he called the real thing. He died in early 1970 when a Huey he had jumped on for transport to the front was shot down. One of his cameras was recovered intact in the debris field, and somebody at base developed the film. It turned out Zinn was shooting frames the whole time the chopper was taking fire and then going down. Whether he was valiantly documenting his own death or thinking he was going to have great shots to file when he got back to base camp could never be known. But knowing Zinn, Bosch believed he thought he was invincible, and the chopper crash would not be the end of the line. As Bosch took up the Jesperson case after so many years, he wondered if Annika Jesperson had been like Zinn. Sure of her invincibility, sure that her camera and press pass would lead her through the fire. There was no doubt that she had put herself in harm's way. He wondered what her last thought was when her killer pointed the gun at her eye. Was she like Zinn? Had she taken his picture? According to a list provided by her editor in Copenhagen and contained in the RCTF investigation file, Jesperson carried a pair of Nikon 4s and a variety of lenses. Of course, her field equipment was taken and never recovered. Whatever filmed clues might have been in her cameras were long gone. The RCTF investigators developed the canisters of film found in the pockets of her vest. Some of these black and white 8x10 prints, along with 4 proof sheets showing miniatures of all 96 shots, were in the murder book, but they offered very little in the way of evidence or investigative leads. They were simply shots of the California National Guard mustering at the Coliseum after being called into the fray in Los Angeles. Other shots were of guardsmen manning barricades at intersections in the riot zone. There were no shots of violence or burning and looting, though there were several of guardsmen on post outside businesses that had been looted or burned. The photos were apparently taken on the day of her arrival, after she had gotten her press pass from the LAPD. Beyond their historic value as documentation of the riots, the photos were deemed useless to the murder investigation in 1992, and Bosch couldn't disagree with that assessment 20 years later. The RCTF file also contained a property report dated May 11, 1992, and detailing the recovery of the Avis rental car that Jesperson had picked up at San Francisco International. The car had been found abandoned on Crenshaw Boulevard, 7 blocks from the alley where her body was found. In the 10 days it had been sitting there, it had been broken into and its interior stripped. The report stated that the car and its contents, or lack thereof, had no investigative value. What it came down to was that the one piece of evidence found by Bosch within the first hour of the investigation remained the most important hope for a resolution: the bullet casing. Over the past 20 years, law enforcement technologies had grown at light speed. Things not even dreamed about then were routine now. The advent of technological applications to evidence and crime solving had led to reassessments of old unsolved crimes everywhere on the planet. Every major metropolitan police department had teams assigned to cold case investigations. Using new technologies on old cases sometimes came down to shooting fish in a barrel. DNA matches, fingerprint matches, and ballistics matches often led to slam-bang cases against culprits who had long believed they had gotten away with murder. But sometimes it was more complicated. One of the first moves Bosch made upon reopening case number 9212-00346 was to take the bullet casing to the firearms unit for analysis and profiling. Because of the workload backup and the non-priority status of cold case requests coming from the open unsolved unit, 3 months went by before Bosch got a return. The response wasn't a panacea, an answer that would immediately solve the case, but it gave Bosch a pathway. After 20 years of no justice for Annika Jesperson, that wasn't bad at all. The firearms report gave Bosch the name Rufus Coleman, 41 years old and a hardcore member of the Rolling 60s Crips gang. He was currently incarcerated for murder in the California State Penitentiary at San Quentin.